I'm Jeff Cook,
And I'm TJ Wilson.
and this is Around the Circle.
I'm walking slowly, I'm taking my time. All I could talking is starting to rhyme. I'm letting go of lonely, letting go of strife. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life.
The Enneagram is a map of the human personality. It's a tool for navigating relationships. It creates language for what motivates us and helps us look at the way we look at everything else. Most importantly, the Enneagram's a mirror because sometimes you need help seeing yourself. My name's Jeff Cook. I'm a philosopher in Greeley, Colorado, and with me is TJ Wilson, businessman, lover of theology, and Enneagram Ninja.
Hello.
So, as you know, I need affirmations just occasionally. Not very often,
Just
but
occasionally?
just occasionally.
Yeah.
Read recently that the title professor
Yeah.
is a lifelong title.
Ooh.
So say it's the case that you step away from your professorial job.
Yeah, sure.
You get to continue to be a professor.
Nice. Congratulations.
I need standing and made up titles
Yeah.
to give me value,
think
apparently.
Validation is another good word to use here.
Yep.
I never would have known that about you. Interesting.
For those of us, for those of you who don't know, I presently rent out physical spaces, like buy buildings and rent out spaces. And for whatever reason, like for my entire life, I've been chasing like the world of ideas. Get a chance to obviously do a lot of that here, but there's something lacking when I'm just like, well, I've got a podcast that I record. It's great. People listen.
Yeah, that's true. There's nothing
I'm a professor.
tangible about it, though. And there's no one above us to say you've done a good job.
I need somebody to. I don't need it all the time. Just once or twice.
And listener, you should hear that me saying it isn't enough.
No, you're the one creating it.
Right.
We need like there is a difference. This is between quantity and quality. Like if we had 100,000 listeners, it would be one thing. If we had 100 listeners, but all of them were the finest Enneagram thinkers in the world, that's a different thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you have a preference, or do you even care?
I don't even care.
Yep.
If we had 7 listeners and all of them were our friends, I would be fine with that because I feel good about what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as you got your hobbit hole and nothing's gonna break.
Yeah. It would be much more like a regular hobby at that point as opposed to like a side hustle kind of thing like it is now.
Sure.
But yeah, I'd be totally fine with that.
Just naming my insecurities.
It's a thing.
But hey, guess what? I'm a professor.
It's true.
So, speaking of people that know things, we left off with the 5s last time. I suppose I should probably set up all of the things that we're doing. Unless you got the summary kind of in your head of what we've tackled.
I feel like my summary is go back and listen to part 1.
We're doing an intro to underlying feelings, and then we're just blowing open the whole rest of the Enneagram and saying, and notice this, and notice this, and notice this.
The overlap of feelings with time and our focus and our fears and our sins and all of these things. Yeah, it just there's an overlap, and that's what we're doing. Basically, an audio version of a Venn diagram.
It's always hard to describe. Here's what I'm seeing.
Right.
I'm in front of the Mona Lisa, and she's kind of looking to the left.
But is she?
One big thing that we should elevate is the idea of focus. This is a category TJ and I have created, something that we're elevating and saying this really matters when talking about underlying feelings. Focus for 8s, 9s, and 1s for body types is about their spaces. These can be both exterior spaces, but oftentimes are also internal spaces. Mm-hmm. How do they feel inside? Do they feel comfortable?
Yeah, like the energy, the physical sense of your body in the space, the sort of undefinable, like walk into a room and you get a sense of what the room is like.
How does my clothing make me feel?
Yeah.
How does my weight make me feel? Mm-hmm. It's not a comparative. When I think about weight, it's very seldom what do people think about me and my physical body.
Yeah.
It's much more intuitive.
Yeah.
It's much more, I want to have a certain connection with my body and feel a certain way about my body.
Right.
And that bleeds out. My 8 child, very concerned about the texture of their food and about how their clothing makes them feel.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they are neurodivergent, and so it's elevated, but it's still the case. External feelings about their environments matter.
Yep.
5, 6s, and 7s focus on assets, on the things that they have acquired that will give them a sense of security. These can be all sorts of things: knowledge, wealth, friendships, a community that cares about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, positions in like job security and opportunities within that position, and like all the different things that you can sort of point at and say, "This is mine." That's all kinds of different resources for 5, 6, and 7s.
And 2s, 3s, and 4s, which we covered last time, focused on relationships. And a lot of comparison there. Lots of what do other people think about me going on.
Yeah.
These are the focus of our types given our centers. Second big idea is underlying feeling. Coming out of these focuses is often the anger when one can't control their spaces, or the fear when one doesn't have the right assets, or the shame when relationships have gone badly.
Mm-hmm.
And so anger, fear, and shame, we spent a lot of time last time unpacking those, but that's going to be a huge part of our conversation here.
Yep.
We're going to jump into the 6s. We talked about 5s and their assets last time: data, insights, knowledge. 6s have a very different kind of asset that they generally prefer to make them feel safe.
Yeah.
You want to talk about 6s?
Yeah. We talked about 5s collect information and make themselves feel safe by being sort of prepared for the things that are coming. And 6s are prepared in a different kind of way. They plan for all of the things that might go wrong. They are ready and capable of handling all of the situations, but a big part of that is by surrounding themselves with people and doing the right work to make sure that those people are supporting them when they are in need. So it looks a lot like relationships from the 2s, 3s, and 4s. But with 6s, they are trying to make sure that they are in the right group. They are in the right system or hierarchy to get the security that they're looking for. If I stay within these bounds, then I know that I'm safe. And this person has set up the rules that define what these bounds are, so that I get protected by this person by being part of their team.
A lot of external energy, investments in the group. How can I serve you? How can I earn the security I desire?
Yep.
In my family, in my job, in my platoon, in whatever you're surrounded by that provides you with that security, and that is an asset.
Yep. And I think that extends to all kinds of things. That my partner is a 6, and the cleanliness of the house is part of this, because if the house is not the way that it's quote unquote supposed to be, then she can't get her work done. She can't focus on the things that she should be doing because this house isn't right and she might get in trouble. Like that's not real, but there is a sense built into her of how things are supposed to look. And we don't really get a clear picture of that if we don't realize that part of what is happening is that she is sort of comparing herself to other people. Other people keep their houses well, and that means they are good adults.
You want to talk about why that's different from the ways 2s, 3s, and 4s experience comparison?
Yeah, because I think that with 2s, 3s, and 4s, their concern is the relationship. And they want to make sure that other people see them a certain way. And with 6s, who are not focused necessarily on the relationship, but on the security that they get from relationships, 6s use comparison to make sure that they're safe. The comparison is about what do other people accomplish, and am I measuring up to those people? It's less about what people think and more about, do I measure up? Do I meet the standards that other people are setting? It's an earning posture, and it's a. We did talk about being threes being sort of independently referenced, and twos being externally referenced. Sixes are also externally referenced, and so they get their understanding of their safety and security from outside themselves. And the only way to do that is to see if you're measuring up with the people around you.
Sixes are taking in the world through the future, like the other head types, responding to it in the present. And you'll notice how the fear emerges. The fear materializes in the present as a fear of not, a feeling like one won't be supported.
Mm-hmm.
That is going in two directions. That's not just my family, my tribe, my job isn't going to support me. It's also internally focused of, I don't know if I have what it takes. I don't trust my thinking and the rest.
Right.
You want to talk about the fear there?
Yeah, that fear, that the way that doubt sort of creeps in and infects everything about them. Like we said, externally referenced, they don't trust their own thinking. They don't trust their own capabilities. And because they are looking at the possibilities of the future and they don't trust themselves, they also don't trust all of the things that have happened in the past. I feel like sixes are one of the types that more actively reject the one that they are missing, because the past is not a good indicator of the future for sixes, because anything could happen in the future. So who cares what happened in the past? The things that are coming are the things that I'm worried about. And I only have what's in front of me to be able to respond to those possibilities.
The negative side of this, when sixes really allow their fear to build and it materializes in their life in damaging ways, the passion of, or the traditional sin pops up. And for sixes, it's doubt of self, doubt of others, etc.
Yep.
And the fixation, which I think is a little bit more interesting here, the fixation is more of a cowardice or a recklessness, depending on how the instinct gets played out. But those can be debilitating, circles to get spun into.
Yeah, there's this lack of being able to productively think that sort of moves into this cowardice of like, if you don't trust yourself, you're not going to make brave decisions because you don't trust your own ability, your own mind to be making the right choices. If you don't trust yourself or the people around you, that there can, like, that not thinking is what recklessness is. It's not really, it's just sort of advancing regardless of what might happen. It's the idea of F around and find out. Like, this is, recklessness is a lack of thinking, a lack of planning, and just charging forward anyway. And that and cowardice are basically like, they're two responses to the same thing. It's not being able to think, not being able to properly and productively think, not being able to trust, not being able to respond to what has already happened to help inform you what to do next.
You'll notice again the orientation to time on all of this, that there are future fears the six perceives because they're taking in the world through their head.
Right.
And so you can't escape anticipating what might go wrong.
Right.
And they are responding in the present with the tools they have. Sixes, ones, and twos all have present tools to get the things that they want. And so it's going to be, I'm going to earn my place in the tribe in order to alleviate my future fears. The elevation here at this point, like how do you escape that? We're going to talk quite a bit about that as we move forward, but just to tease it, the obvious thing is you need to start to trust yourself, trust your circle, you need to elevate that repressed center. These are all ways to escape the vortex, that doom loop.
Yep. Engage your mind.
Engage your mind.
Sort of clear things out. I also want to mention that we had talked about this in the last episode, that I think there's one type in each center that is
Yes.
not seeking to get away from their underlying feeling, anger, fear, and shame. And I think 6s are the type in the head center, because I think that the lack of productive thinking means that fears are not processed appropriately, which means that 6s don't know that they should be getting away from that fear.
Right.
Most of the 6s I know are very comfortable with saying we should be afraid of these things.
Yeah, that's where my mind went.
Yeah.
When you mentioned it last time, it took me a minute to get my head around that, but you're correct in terms of 8s, 4s, and 6s all elevate their underlying feeling
Right.
in order to expose the problem at hand,
Yep.
because everybody else should care about this thing that's making me so emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly they have the same emotions. Don't you see that X, Y, and Z is going to destroy us?
Right.
The 6 is elevating fear.
Right.
And so too, the 8 is elevating their anger.
Yeah, they're completely comfortable with their anger, unlike almost all of the rest of us. 8s are like, yeah, anger is a tool. It's good.
Yeah.
And we deal with it, and then we move on.
And you should be angry at the things I'm angry about as well.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you why you should be angry. And the 4s, I mean, you want to play that out? How the 4s are elevating the past in those ways?
Yeah, and comfortable with shame in the sense of it's a part of them, and if they're trying to get rid of it, that means they're trying to deny a part of who they are.
Yep. And that's you got to, I think we have to put our thumb on the problem solving portion of that.
Yep.
So when things are breaking, when they don't feel comfortable, and when 4s begin elevating, here's my authentic self and all the dark spots as well. I want you to see me
Yep.
and all the things that I've gone through and the ways that I'm not valuable in the way these other people might be valuable to myself and perhaps to the world, etc. The using shame to solve problems. And the problem will be solved when they can feel as though they're seen, feel as though they understand their own place and uniqueness. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And potentially even seeing themselves finding other people who have the same amount of shame, that's where I'll be home.
Right. Yeah, the idea of the fatal flaw kind of comes in
Yes.
my head there.
Exactly.
Moving to the 7s. Again, asset-focused type. The asset is not data. It's not necessarily wealth, not necessarily friendships and relationships. Talk about the asset for 7s.
The asset for 7s is opportunity.
Aye.
And 7s who are looking for that they want to find their security. They are looking for, there's always an option for the next thing. If this thing that I'm in right now turns out bad, the best way to overcome that is to have a plan B, to have somewhere else I can go, to be able to cross the street when the sidewalk ends, to have other opportunities, other adventures, other places that they can go to sort of escape or avoid. Or why would you want to stay in unpleasantness when you could go to a theme park or wherever else, a mental theme park even? There's always more opportunities to do something that's not bad, and keeping my foot in the door to make sure that I have those opportunities, that keeps me safe.
The unpleasantness might sound like it's external. This is where it's very helpful for the rest of us to understand Enneagram. The direction for 7s is internal.
Right.
And so it could be the case that stuff is crappy all around you, and yet you're making the best out of it. Like, look at all this manure and what we could do with it.
Right.
Even though you're surrounded by a bunch of crap.
Right.
It's the internal darkness that the 7 is avoiding.
Exactly.
Their underlying feeling goes inward, just like 1s and 4s. And so it's very important to note that the 7 is moving in order to not feel that fear, or they fear the dark sides of experience that they have inside.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's we call their fear deprivation or lack. And it's about not having enough to be able to get through. And that's sort of what, like, the stuckedness, the not being able to move on is about. Like, they can go through something unpleasant so long as they know there's an exit. There's an end date, because they don't feel like they have enough to make it through the hard stuff. That is the big fear for them. And so they're always looking for the next opportunity, always looking for the way out, the world of possibilities in front of them, because if there's something more, then they know they won't get stuck and in this place of lack.
For those of us who love sevens, we might see some of the behavior coming out as escapist in nature. That's what the gluttony is about.
Right.
And so the passion that's associated with sevens is gluttony. It's this overconsumption. And it's not about, ingesting more calories. It's about the escapism.
Right. It's about, we talked about greed or avarice with fives being about sort of protecting what you have. And sevens aren't interested in protecting. Their focus is entirely on the future. They're interested in consuming, in getting forward. In it's not just about having 2 scoops of ice cream. It's about having more ice cream.
When that works its way into the mind, we use the word scheming, and that can just, again, be a doom loop of I consume and then think about the next thing to consume and consume and then think about the next thing to consume. How am I always scheming about what is next? And you're never present. You're never dealing with the underlying things that really need some attention. And there you go.
You're never satiated or satisfied at all in those moments where you're getting the thing that you were trying to get.
Correct. Sevens are future focused in terms of taking in the world through their head, responding to their future fears with future tools. So what am I going to do next Saturday to alleviate the fear that's coming at me from next Saturday? That places them in that strange spot of always being in the future. The negative side is scheming. Can you spell out the positive side of using future tools?
Yeah, I think that we all know, like, sevens are great entertainers. They want people to enjoy themselves because that's what they want for themselves. But they also that future focus means there's a big idea around the corner. There's something to be done with that future focus, and it means like they're pulling us into the world of possibilities as well. It's not just that they're looking to run toward the next thing. It's that they want everyone to have a good time, and they're full of possibilities. Like I'm not good at creative planning or like big idea kind of stuff. I'm just not. That's not how my brain works. But all of the sevens I know are like, what if we did this thing? And I'm like, yes, let's go.
Thing that goes through my mind is with your future tools, you should plan on sobriety. You should plan
Right.
on doing some internal work. You should plan on entering those spaces where you can really shore up your feeling center.
Yeah.
And engaging that way can give you some much needed balance. And it's replacing one thing, with another. I could go on this, I could hit these 12 bars next Saturday night, or, if you replace that with something really, 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 really valuable that allows you to pause and be present, this can be great for your soul.
Yep. Agreed.
Moving to eights. Moving into the body types. So again, moving into spaces. And eights in particular have that external focus. And so they are angry at the stuff out there.
Yeah.
Eights feel their own vulnerability. And so the anger that can materialize for eights often comes out of that space. I don't want to feel vulnerable. I don't want to be betrayed. I don't want to be hurt in those ways. And so I create a castle wall, as it were, to oppose what might be doing damage to my inner core.
Right. Yeah, eights, I think, have the most energy and are the most sort of self-assured, and that just carry around this belief that most of them I don't think would name without having heard someone say it, but it's that they can rearrange the world according to how they think it's supposed to be or how they want it to be. And this ties into their desire to not be controlled, and especially that we interpret, a lot of us understand that desire to be in control. And I don't think that's what it is. I think they just, they naturally think that they can change things. And when other people are doing things wrong, they'll step into that leadership role because they want the world to be a certain way.
Yep. Biggest epiphany I had for 8s and 9s. I'm going to use both the numbers for a second. Ends up being the person that TJ and I work with, and we had a problem. And it shone out for me in the problem that we were experiencing. TJ has intentionally created a coffee shop. Coffee shops are very even keel, mellow spaces, have kind of a deliberate pace to them intentionally, especially the way that TJ has set up his coffee shop. There's not a lot of run. We make things at a very deliberate clip. Yep. And I'm sure if you've come here, you're willing to wait 15 minutes for your drink.
Let's hope.
We also have weddings in our space.
Yes.
The thing about the weddings is it's a surge of energy. Mm-hmm. There's a potency to weddings that has a lot of energy, celebration, passion going on there. And as opposed to the deliberate coffee shop.
Right.
If you're serving drinks at a wedding, generally it's in these explosive movements.
Right.
It's things are getting started. Everybody go get your cocktail and we're going to get going.
Yeah. There's a cocktail hour at weddings. There is not a cocktail hour at coffee shops.
That's right. So you have 120 orders for cocktails coming in. How do you deal with this? So as we're running our business, this had become kind of an issue for us in terms of how do we set up things such that drinks get served. And the 8, I saw it for the first time here, was using future tools to not feel vulnerable in this area. He knew what it was like to have a line of 100 people waiting for cocktails. And that's his paycheck, right? And if he can't slam through those very fast, he's not going to get future business. He's also, not going to make his paycheck in that moment. We need systems by which we can do this. And so he's thinking well ahead. I need this stocked. I need this kind of tools. I need this kind of system. I'm going to buy it now I have my future focus, and I'm acting now to ensure that I don't feel vulnerable next Friday.
Right.
That seems to me a great way to understand how 8s are in the world. They're using future tools. This is what I need to do ahead of time to ensure that they aren't vulnerable in the moment.
And even more to that point, that it's not necessarily about being the one in charge of it, but the fact that he wasn't the one in charge of it for a period of time meant that he did not have control over it, and he couldn't. The vulnerability came in when, if anything went wrong, it wasn't his say.
Yeah.
And so just the fact of like sort of shifting that responsibility from the coffee shop side to him being in charge of it, even if everything is exactly the same, he feels better because he doesn't feel like he's under my thumb in those moments.
It's also the case, and to circle back to spaces, all of us are very aware of the atmosphere in that building.
Yep.
And if you're throwing an event, he is taking that kind of on himself in those at those levels. And this is an interesting mixture for the three of us, because in a similar way, the deliberate desire of TJ is to create an atmosphere during the other, 6 days of the week where it's a very different pace in
Right.
that space.
Right.
Worth noting that. I'll come back to that when we hit nines, but just that illustration has always been just super helpful for me.
Yeah.
To push into the sin and fixation, it's all over this. Lust and control go together.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about spaces. Lust has so much to do with our physical understanding of ourself in the world.
Right.
It's wanting carnal experiences to a high level.
I consistently feel like eights are really pushing hard against the world to get a response.
Mm-hmm.
And the desire for intensity of experience is in part that, like, what out there can punch back.
Yeah.
And I also want the world to know that I can punch.
Yeah.
And both those things are very valuable because they allow me to control myself and not feel vulnerable.
Yep.
The fixation for eights is vengeance, and you can see how that might materialize. Like
Absolutely.
when people actually do hurt you mentally, that vengeance is a future focused. I mean, that's a negative use of your future tools. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And pairing that with this, we've barely talked about anger with eights so far because eights are so comfortable with anger. And I think a lot of eights have reported that they feel everything through anger first because anger is one of the most passionate emotions. And eights are all about intensity and passion. And when you put all of these things in a pot together and like lean on unhealthiness to heat up that pot, you get vengeance, anger, and wanting to be in control and wanting to ensure you're not vulnerable. And then you put in this splash of lust, of passion for intensity. And if anyone ever does anything to you that makes you feel vulnerable, then your anger rises up and says, nope, not going to happen again. And I'll show you why, because I'm going to just destroy you to make sure it can't happen again.
That's exactly right. Getting out of that is difficult. Future tools, you gotta aim those future tools at what? At creating spheres where you can be emotionally vulnerable with others. Creating, really investing in those relationships where your heart can be on full display and you don't have to be angry, and anger isn't the default. It's that this is a space where I can be my full authentic self and embrace all of my emotions, not just allowing them to, come out as anger. I suppose the other thing, go ahead.
I'm not sure what your question is.
What's the solution to these things? Like, how do you move out of that?
Yeah.
Seems to me like the future, your stance is future focused. So that's the tools you got.
Right.
Stance is future focus. Focus on creating some really sound relationships, one or two even, in which you can, expose everything about yourself and not just, punch at the world out there.
Yeah. And I think also using that sort of thinking about future tools, you're not an island, and eventually you're going to need other people, and you have to figure out how to do this now, or else you're going to drive everyone around you away.
Another thing, and we'll get to this at some point, the push to innocence is real interesting for eights. In my mind, it's like almost targeting places where you get a chance to engage the world where it is innocent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for whatever reason, I have like an image in my head of going to the Dumb Friends League and surrounding yourself with puppies for an hour. But
sure.
I'm sure that's not necessarily the right prescription, but it might be. Hang out with a handful of first graders for a little bit. You will be the strongest. They won't be able to hurt you. You will get to enjoy, just the innocence there, and that can be good for the soul.
Yeah, when you think of innocence, there's like our minds often go to like children. And that's because children carry an openness to the world. They have not learned yet that they have to put on armor.
Yeah.
And this is the place that we're talking about when we talk about 8s and innocence.
Yeah, drop your shields in those ways. That's good. 9s. Nines focus again is spaces. Can obviously it's keeping the spaces calm. The underlying feeling of anger, TJ will describe as being asleep to that anger. But as we've said in many podcasts, that anger is there. And often the reason that 9s feel so exhausted is because they're trying to keep that explosion from erupting outward.
Yeah. We're just holding these doors closed while this river, this lake is trying to seep into the building. And anger is always present, and we don't like it because anger leads to conflict, and conflict is bad. And all conflict is bad, so we should avoid anger, right?
This isn't just anger at the people out there, but it can be anger at yourself. So similar to 1s on this front.
Yep. It can be anger itself. It can be anger at... Well, this is an interesting thing because 9s being sort of... I like the term the crown of the Enneagram, like right at the top there. We see everyone else more clearly than we see ourselves. It's great. I love it. But the fact that we see all sides of things means that our anger doesn't have a good place to go. Even when we're angry at something that happened, we can recognize that, like, this is one of the things that I've always struggled with anger, is that I see anger as pointing at something else. So I never fully embrace my anger because I believe that it's not real. When it is, and it's a motivator to action and all this stuff, but because I don't clearly understand anger and because I can see multiple sides, it's like I can't get mad at that person because I'm trying to understand what it's like to be in their shoes. And so I'm holding back this anger that I feel internally, not just from exploding onto this other person, but also from feeling the anger.
9s taking in the world through the present are going to respond to the present with past tools. The thing about 9s, and many of us who love 9s know this, 9s can be hoarders. They can be collectors. That isn't only of items, that is of people.
Yeah.
If you blow up at a person, you're going to lose connection.
That is correct.
This will not be somebody you can rely on in the future to ensure that you have the peace that is desired and control over your space.
Yep. And if he's the one guy I know that has a truck, then I have to find a new guy that has a truck. Do you know how much effort that's going to be? He's my truck guy.
That underlying fear, and this is core of losing connection, is right there for the 9. 9s attach to the world. They attach to those who are going to give them control over their spaces. And as said, if you push people away or if your anger goes outward, you're going to lose connection, and therefore, 9s avoid conflict.
Right.
Real important to note as well that same posture is going inward. I assume it's the case that 9s don't want to feel disconnected from themselves, as it were.
Well, and that's true, but also I think it's about the way, because I understand who I am based on my indefinable sense of my space in the world. That also means that all of the things that are connected to me are part of my understanding of who I am. When I have these specific tools that I've kept for 15 years and all of a sudden I don't have them anymore, I feel disconnected from who I am. And that brings up anger. And it doesn't matter if there's a pair of pliers that work exactly the same way in that drawer. The pliers that I've had for 15 years I can't find, and now I don't know who I am anymore. And like, obviously that's a little bit tongue in cheek, but that is a very real sense of like the way that I collect things, the way that I keep things around. Most of my stuff ties back to something in my past. It helps me understand how I've gotten to where I am and who I am now. And those past tools are the thing that informs how I'm moving forward. And when I lose connection with something from my past, I lose connection with a part of myself.
And put that together as a footnote. It's really worth bringing in affect groups here.
Sure.
That nines are going to attach to people in relationships in order to get control. I'd never really thought about attaching to items in order to get control, but that's what it is.
Yep.
And so too, ones are going to be idealists, and that's going to be not only about relationships and drawing people in, it's going to be about the items. Worthwhile. When that fear goes negative, as we've said in the past, sloth in the heart, indolence in the mind, these are the fruit. You want to talk about how that avoidance of conflict and ends up going south?
Yeah, and it's when you avoid conflict at all times, when you're really just trying to sort of make the peace and you everything should be stasis. Like we're looking for homeostasis here. We want things to be calm and normal and like everyone let's let everyone get along. And when you work that hard at maintaining the peace, like I think of like it's almost like if you stand for nothing, what do you fall for? Like the way that you maintain peace is by not caring enough about things to disrupt that peace. And that's what sloth is about. It's not about slowing down. It's not about couch potato. It's about not engaging yourself correctly and moving through your life in ways that actually affect the world. And then indolence being the part where you actually stop caring about affecting the world. You stop caring about the things that are important and become more and more comfortable with blending into the furniture.
Can be a lot of short-term gain, long-term loss that comes along with going with the flow.
Yep.
Because you start posturing yourself you start contorting yourself.
Yeah.
When you go with the flow.
Yep.
And also the going with the flow also has that underlying edge to it of my presence doesn't matter. And so why would I act?
Right.
I'll just go along to get along.
And the fact that I don't
connection.
act means my presence matters less. And that means that I act less. And that means that my presence matters less, etc.
You want to gain more energy, you just need to act more. It's an unfortunate.
Inertia's a real thing, y'all. It's the worst, but it's real.
Getting your body moving. This might be a suggestion for nines. What does it look like to remember in the past when you were moving and things actually didn't completely break?
Right.
Being reminded of past successes attributable to action, I imagine, could be quite helpful. Not sometimes actions do end up in conflict and things breaking, but
and not even necessarily successes, but like every time I work big rushes with other people at the coffee shop, it's this invigorating, like, I love my job. And every time I have moments like that, it's like, oh yeah, I really love this. Remembering that, like, yes, it's hard work and I don't love being busy all the time at the coffee shop, but having those instances of reminding me how great it is helps motivate me to do it in the future again.
Yep. And as has been said, nines need to ride that energy because it will slow down and it's hard for nines to ratchet it back up.
Yep.
Last kind of word there is, it seems to me that is not only a love for other people, like you actually are in your vocation, serving other people, creating spaces for other people. There is something about a desire for other people's benefit and thriving that comes out of your work that can rightly be called love. Like there's, in terms of inviting people into your space, this is a caring thing. Likewise the case, again, nine's energy is going outward and inward. There is a caring for yourself. in those spaces as well. When kneeling to inertia, that this is not a self-loving posture.
Right. Because sloth and indolence, the lack of action, the lack of care is not just about how I affect everything out there. It's also about how my inaction, my inability to do what I need to do to take care of myself and my surroundings affects me.
Right.
Not caring about stuff makes me disconnected from things. And that, like, if I matter at all, then I need to believe that I matter.
We can kind of see that with, you can imagine the person who's been lying in bed for 3 days says, no, I'm just caring for myself. This does not look like care.
Right.
You know, if I forced somebody else to be in a room by themselves, stay in that bed for 3 straight days, that strikes me as almost a torturous
Sure.
situation.
Sure.
I saw that movie 7.
I feel like there are people out there that could benefit from, laying in bed for 3 days because they need to just stop spinning for a second.
This is true.
But after 3 days, you have to get back up and do something. Like laying in bed for 3 days only because 3 days is when you stop counting, and however many more you go is however many it will be. That's bad. Taking a break, not so bad. But with 9s, it's really easy for our breaks to turn into long-term kind of stuff.
That's it. Let's move to the 1s.
Great.
Land this plane. Focus again for 1s is going to be spaces. I tried to move this in the intro to saying we need to think about 1's spaces as being internal. So even when 1s can come across as perfectionistic with their environments, it really is about how they feel within, as opposed to 8s who are very focused on the external because it makes them feel vulnerable. The external for 1s makes them feel spoiled or corrupted if they're in control of the space. It can make them feel a certain way about themselves. So we kind of said this with 6s in terms of the ones who can be obsessed with dirty houses or dirty work environments. It's really not about the environment. It's about something else.
Right.
So do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, and I think that opening the conversation today with talking about validation, I think was a really nice way to sort of get us there, because when 1s are thinking about their spaces, they're not just thinking about how they feel in the space, but they're also thinking about how they think other people are going to feel in the space. Because if I do this space right, then other people will validate me for doing this space right. It means I'm good. And if I am the one in charge of this space and something's wrong and someone else notices that something's wrong, it's not just that the space is wrong, it's that I'm wrong. Something is wrong with me. I'm bad. I did a bad job because someone else doesn't feel right in this space.
Yep. We have a real helpful discussion with Joey Shuey, which we may or may not publish. We'll see. But in our conversation, she made a really clever distinction for 1s about being praised for doing a good job and being praised for being a good person.
Yep.
And 1s want the latter.
Yep.
It may appear that we want somebody to say, hey, you did that very, very well. What ends up happening is if you praise my work, I'm going to be immediately critical of my work because you've invited me into a space of judgment.
Right.
You've judged my work, and so clearly I'm going to judge my work, and now I'm in that mental space. But if you say you're a good person, you're a good man, it's a very different kind of quality, because that's actually what many 1s desire, is simply to be good and whole, and they can rest in some of that language.
Right. And I think for a lot of 1s, it's actually really tricky to see that distinction, because it's so easy to believe that you are what you do.
Yep.
You are the impact that you've had on the world. And if that impact is incorrect, incomplete, not done well, whatever, then that obviously means that you're a bad person. And that's just not true. That's part of the, we need to get away from that lie for 1s, and they need to start recognizing that who they are is separate from what they've done, how they've affected their space.
Right. Seems so obvious to me that if I do things really well, then I'll feel good about myself.
Yeah.
And I recognize that's just not how most people roll.
Right.
This is where the anger materializes, and you'll notice the anger for 8's going outward, anger for 1's is going inward.
Yep.
The reason it's going inward is because of the self-critical posture
Right.
at these places.
Right. This is where the critic, the voice inside that's giving you a hard time about everything that you've done, that's where this lives. It's about the corruption, the possibility of corruption, the whole thing about not doing things well comes from the critic in your head saying you're a bad person because you didn't do this thing well.
I was listening to Russ Hudson was on an interview on Zoom that I participated in. He wanted to use the language that all the types have a critic, but the 1's critic is different.
Right.
I think the volume's probably a little bit higher, but you want to talk about the difference between the inner critic for 1's and everyone else?
Yeah, I think that all of us have some, hopefully, all of us have some sort of voice in our head that a lot of us call a conscience, and a lot of us understand as, it can be peer pressure, it can be I think it's the superego that sort of like examines the self from outside, and most of us have that sort of voice in our head that looks at the things you've done or how you see yourself, like that conversations you have with yourself, the other version. We all have that. And for all the rest of us, I think 1's, 2's, and 6's are in a particular category, but for all the rest of us, we don't have the same kind of relationship with that voice because we don't really think that voice has as much sway. And when 1's, 2's, and 6's hear that voice and it enters into their thinking center, which they don't have a good relationship with in the first place, they struggle to think productively, that voice holds a lot more power. It holds a lot more say over how they think, how they process what they've done, what they're planning on doing, what other people think about them. That voice, because of their thinking repression, just has more power. And I think for 1's, because they have this internal direction for their anger, that voice also carries a lot of anger.
Yeah. As you're talking, the thing that is coming to my mind is that the superego here, the conscience, when unhealthy, will weaponize our underlying feeling.
Right.
So for the 6, it's going to be you're not thinking through this enough, or for the 2, you did. The shame comes out in the way that the inner critic for the 2 would process those.
Right.
For 1's, the energy becomes anger, and it becomes a very improvement, a toxic improvement seeking. The way I experience it is a diminishment of my value kind of beliefs.
Right. Yeah.
And so that wrath is the sin here for 1's, and the wrath is just turned inward.
Yep.
Couple pet peeves I have out there in Enneagram world, and it's the fixation of resentment that I have a pet peeve about. I think what resentment is really about is not having your ideals met. So sometimes a lot of people, when seeing the behavior, note the word, of 1's, they will see resentment coming out when their ideals for themselves and others don't materialize.
Mm-hmm.
Same resentment we see in 7's, same resentment we see in 4's.
Yeah.
It's actually quite common. What the rest of the world doesn't see, because it doesn't necessarily become behavior in the same kind of way as hypersensitivity.
Yeah.
And I think that's the fixation for 1's.
Yeah.
1's are incredibly sensitive internally.
Yep.
At a can become a microscopic degree because, again, the desire to not feel corrupt.
Yeah.
And if their ideals get out of control in that space, for themselves, then it can be, again, quite toxic.
Yeah. And I think that like that is also a better way to understand what is the quote unquote perfectionism of one's, because that hypersensitivity is about the things that aren't exactly right. The things that are a little bit off can set off that hypersensitivity. And that then sort of spills out into the rest of the world, and like what we see is someone who thinks that if that light bulb is out, people won't want to be here. Mm-hmm. And what they experience is everything has to be perfect. Like everything has to be a certain way in order for it to work correctly. That is hypersensitivity.
Yep. Notice how easily the light bulb thing's a perfect example. I didn't earn what I wanted to earn because I made these mistakes.
Right.
So this is the challenge for ones that are present. So they're taking in the world through their present, responding in the present. But 8s, 9s, and 1s all have that avoidance to the present that weaves its way in because you can never control the present.
Right.
And so the message for 1s ends up being you need to be a little bit looser. You need to loosen up your standards. The language of right and wrong may not be helpful.
Right.
It's wrong to think in right and wrong categories, which is a contradiction, and it's still very pragmatically beneficial.
Right.
Or
correct.
said a different way.
Correct.
Yeah. Said a different way, it's healthy. It is healthy to take on a serene posture. It's healthy to be more, this is how, even though things are in a state of disorder, this is the way they should be, and to kind of embrace an underlying logic or reason to the way reality flows that sometimes is messy.
Yeah. And even to accept that you may not be the one that needs to fix that thing.
Correct.
Yeah. Part of serenity is staying in your lane.
That's the external posture at work.
Yep.
If your energy is externally postured, if you're an earner, if you control by pushing outward, that health is balancing there.
Right.
It's a straight. So I've started to realize this with my withdrawal move into 4 space is I don't like being in 4 space. I feel uncomfortable in my stress number, but I also have a belief that there are really great times. I see it in other people who are withdrawn types. I see, there's a withdrawn type and they're very healthy and they don't overstep. I wonder if I could be that way. And then I go into withdrawn space, but that's a space that feels, again, this very difficult. Like I'm going into a place that I feel uncomfortable. That's my stress number.
Right.
And so like getting comfortable in the high side of 4 space for the 1, and that takes some muscle and some intentionality and
practice.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, that's been a focus of mine recently. Like, what does it look like for you to really enjoy being in your stress number? Because sometimes it can be quite helpful for some of these types.
Right. Yeah. What are the good things there that you can latch onto and say, oh yeah, this is valuable?
I think my mind is specifically going towards stance here. So for 9s, like it can be real valuable for you to get into an external posture where you are earning things.
Yeah.
I assume that's very uncomfortable, or it can be.
I mean, it's really tricky because I see all sides to everything, and like part of my earning posture when I am in stress can be actually really fun for me.
Okay.
So long as I'm not stuck there. Because I think that I see a lot of times when I do enter into that more earning, like present focused posture, it's like the ability to sort of like turn on a dime and like move and change with things that are happening. Like this is one of the reasons that I like live performance so much more than I like recording. As an audio engineer, is because it's in the moment. It's like you can't. There's such a world of possibilities with recording. Like you can spend forever trying to get it exactly right.
Sure.
But in live performance, you don't have that opportunity. If you get it wrong, you just move on. And there's part of that is exhilarating for me.
That feels like you're using your past tools, your knowledge, and and the assets in your hand to exert your power in the world, which moves you more into 3 space there. Like you can be in control and driving the ship. Yeah.
Yes, but like I'm as an engineer, I'm typically not in control. Like I'm not the decider.
Sure. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. You gotta just react to what's in front of you.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense. It's a dinosaur bone to uncover.
Right.
Just talking more about the stance of your stress number.
Mm-hmm.
Just for dear listener, it's worth. Many of you are informed, so it's just worth naming the stance of your stress number and asking yourself a handful of questions. Journal over that. I'll bet you'll discover a lot of interesting things.
Sure. Well, and it also might be the case that like because ones are present focused and use present tools, being in that sort of like past withdrawn place is really uncomfortable. But for me, I am past focused and use present tools, and being in that more present focused earning place is not that far from my center.
Oh, that could be. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
I think it's the stance. It's the getting. It's the getting what you want through withdrawn tools. As was said before, the more that I think about it, it takes a lot of muscle for me to withhold.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of self-confidence, in fact. Like we've been talking about this with thinking repressed numbers in general. But if you're trying to prove, that you've thought through these things and that you're intelligent and the rest, then that shows you're insecure.
Right.
Whereas like people who are deeply informed never have to prove anything to others.
Right. Right.
But Einstein's not going around saying, you really need to take my theories seriously. It's
Nope. He doesn't care if anyone takes it seriously. It doesn't matter.
And it's similar, I think, when I'm in social situations. Like I started going to this kickboxing studio recently, which I just love the hell out of. And I'm way too, this is my self-critical side, I'm way too out front in terms of trying to put my personality out there in order to get a response. And it's because I'm insecure in that space.
Sure.
It's a new space. I'm not good at this thing yet. I want people to care about me at some level.
Yeah.
And it's just coming out with all these just very assertive energies. And I see that with other ones in twos in particular.
Sure.
Yeah, something there.
Yeah. And, this is a great example of, how we work things out and think about new things. And so
Yeah.
if anyone out there has any thoughts to help, move this conversation forward, we'd love to hear them or read them, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, it is the dinosaur bone. It's if you're an 8, talk about what it looks like to withdraw.
Right.
If you're a 3, talk about what it looks like to withdraw. If you're a 6, assertive energy, what does this feel like? And all the rest. That's interesting. Bang. That's what I got. We're going to end up talking about some underlying feelings for the next month or so.
Great.
To be honest, this is just a core principle. We'll probably weave it into everything.
Yeah. It's not like we haven't talked about it before, so it'll come up. But the Venn diagram, we got to figure out, the overlap here with so many other things.
It's true. I mean, if we ever get off our duffs and put some stuff down on paper, I bet you we could get some diagrams out there into the world.
Yeah.
TJ, you did a great job pitching the need for stars in our last podcast. I was like, why am I even doing this anymore?
Because I recorded that at 8 p.m. After a full day of working and being with a toddler, and it's like, I got to get this done so quick.
Came out just like butter. So, look, algorithms, you guys like us. Come on.
Yep.
'Cause I've already forgotten what you
Actually,
said.
that is the other thing, is that I don't care about the stars.
Right.
I know the practical purpose of it. There we go. That's the pitch.
We continue to meet once a month on Zoom. You can find us on aroundthecircle.org if you want to join those. Just click on events. We also have an event in Colorado in February. I adjust the prices. I was just way too high and mighty on myself. Chunked
Idealist.
them down. I mean, I was. That's So if you were turned away by the $100 ticket, they're down at $45 now, and we'd love to have you. And we're also going to throw a little event, which I don't think we'll get that many people to. So, but if it's for you, we're going to do a typing event the night before. So on Friday night, we'll just meet with folks who want to do Enneagram typing. So if you have friends that are new, just want to jump in, we'd love to have them. And we'll have a full day event on Saturday. If you want an introduction to that, you can always go to our Start Here podcast. Just type Start Here into your podcast platform of choice. You'll see our podcast and ABC News. Go to the one,
That's right.
go to the one that's green and looks like an Enneagram circle.
Yeah. That does not say ABC News.
And then if you're one of the few, the proud, the ones who actually love pop culture, specifically from the 80s and 90s, you can always go to our movie typing podcast, in which there's fantastic, glorious podcast materials to dive into, in which we type famous characters and talk about their motives and how it materializes in the films that we love most. You like Brian Claxton music?
I do. I love Brian Claxton music.
Dude's a boss. Lends us these sweet jams that you're hearing behind
Yep.
this outro. And if you really want to support our work, you can always go to Patreon and send us $5-10. It really makes a difference. That's what I got. You got anything else?
I got nothing, man.
He's CJ Wilson. He is not as long-winded as I am when giving an outro. And I'm Jeff Cook, and I'm entirely secure in myself and my ability to give a pitch here at the end.
Good. Because who you aren't isn't interesting.
Damn straight.